Welcome, 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 welcome. Thank you for joining me. I'm so glad you're here. This is my second episode in the Get Ready With Me cult series. I'm really enjoying this. I really am. My name is Erin Moore, for those that you do not know me. This is Ageless Beauty with Erin. I have multiple different things I talk about. I have my beauty, Get Ready With Me. We talk, makeup and such, which started this page. And then I've got a series where I discuss Evil Lives Here from ID channel, and we go episode by episode and discuss what we're seeing, what we're thinking, what we're feeling. And now my new cult series, and so far I am just loving all of it. So if you are new, thank you for finding me, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit like if you enjoyed the video. If you are my regulars, welcome back. Let's sit down and talk. So today, we are talking about the Unification Church, and admittedly, I don't know much about this church. So I'm learning as I go. The research was quite enlightening, I guess you can say. I have heard the nickname the Moonies before, but I couldn't tell you why, where, how, when. I just had heard it. It kind of drew my attention, and it kind of led me to this group. So I have many questions. And one of the main questions that we are going to discuss at the end of the episode is if this is even a cult. Ha ha ha. Some people don't consider it a cult, so I'm going to be interested in hearing your thoughts and where you are after this episode. So please don't hesitate to type and give me some thoughts. But we will discuss it, and we will discuss why it's considered to be one of the largest cults according to definition. Even current, it is an active cult. So let's jump in, sit back, grab you a drink, snack, whatever you want, get comfy, and as always, to tell the story, let's start back at the beginning. In 1954, the late Reverend Sun Myung started a religious movement called, this is a mouthful, the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity. Whew. And they were classified as a new religious movement. In the 90s, the group became better known as the Unification Church or the Unification Movement, which, like I said, with a mouthful of a name like that, you better be it's not something that just rolls off the tongue. So the Unification Church or the Unification Movement is what they are known now in the 90s. It was also given the nickname Moonies after, the Reverend Sun Moon. And I just realized it was Sun, S-U-N, Moon, M-O-O-N. His middle name's Myung, but I literally just thought of that. I did this whole research and it never even... Anyways. So they were known as the Moonies for quite a while. And eventually, they started to take it as a derogatory term and didn't want anybody calling them that. So, and it would be later be classified as a cult as well. And since its founding in 1954, the movement has attracted hundreds of thousands of members in more than 100 countries, mostly Korea, Japan, and other East Asian nations. Now I'm going to say that number is huge. That's huge. So let's talk a little bit about Moon, the guy that actually started this group. He was born in 1920, and I really didn't see a whole lot. I probably didn't pay a lot of attention either of the date he was born. I just saw he was born in 1920, and I was like, okay, it's all I need to know. But he was born in 1920 in what is now North Korea. His family converted from Confucianism, which, according to the National Geographic, is one of the most influential religious philosophies in the history of China. It is concerned with your inner virtue, your morality, respect for your community, and its values. So, when Moon's family left Confucianism, they converted to Christianity and joined a Presbyterian church. When Moon was 16, he claimed he had a vision in which Jesus appeared to him and told him he needed to complete the task of establishing God's kingdom on earth, God's kingdom on earth, and bring peace to the world. Afterwards, he began preaching his new religious message. And I'm not sure if this really relates to the story, but I found it interesting that because shortly after he started preaching, he was arrested and accused of spying for South Korea. And he spent 5 years in prison. So I'm not really sure how preaching his new religion associated with him getting in prison for spying. And it's never really mentioned again. It just says, for this purpose, he spent so much time in jail and whatever. So I just thought, well, it's worth a mention, right? I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I never really found anything else about it, but I did think it was interesting. So according to Moon, he taught that the world was greater from God's inner nature with the purpose of creation to experience the joy of love. However, according to Moon, when Adam and Eve sinned by fornication, they failed to realize God's purpose. So now, because of this failure, he considered selfish love, it's very confusing here, he considered selfish love dominated human existence, and God sought to restore his original plan, which of course is where man comes in, right? It required the intervention of a Messiah. I probably do not need to tell you that Moon considered himself that Messiah. And this Messiah will instill God's love in his followers and complete Jesus' work. So I think I might have kind of went over it, but no, I haven't. We'll get to there. It's kind of everywhere, and I'm sorry. But Moon considered himself to have married and raised the ideal family, which we will discuss later in. And he called on his members to follow his example and participate in God's plan for restoration. His followers believed they could help establish God's kingdom on earth by accepting the blessing of marriage and a mass wedding ceremony, which the church had become well known for, which again, we'll get into more of this. This is just kind of an outline. I want to break down more of these beliefs in, of course, this mass wedding and son Moon's job as the Messiah and his beliefs and philosophies. It's just a wild one, chillins. Okay, so now, like I said, I know I'm all over the place here. And I'm just trying to give you the basics. And I'm going to circle it all back around, hopefully tie it up, put it in a nice little bow for you to make sense. So, but for now, I'm trying to break it down. That was the overview of Reverend Moon and his thoughts when he started, how he started the church, whatever. So now we're going to get into the beliefs, and we'll get more into it as we go. We'll kind of flesh it out. We'll, really probably talk it to death a little bit, but I feel like some things just need that little talk, right? So I want to talk about the beliefs of the church. And for all his ideas of being the Messiah and restoring God's plan, Moon did not believe in romantic love. Okay. He claimed that there would be marriage, but they needed to have marriage to complete God's plan, which you'll hear. And if you believe his message and plan, yes, you're going to have marriage at some point, right? So, that belief does not want to go on. He claimed that God had intended Jesus to be the second Adam. Okay, follow along with that. First Adam and Eve failed. They fornicated. They ate the apple. They failed God's plan. So he sent God, according to Moon, God sent Jesus down to be the second Adam and to complete his plan of perfect union and whatever. However, Jesus was crucified before he could, marry and finish this all-inspiring plan. So, Myung said God needed a third Adam. That was kind of weird. Third Adam. And this Adam was to complete the perfect union, to undo the damage that Adam and Eve created. Whew. So the perfect man, as the perfect man, he would marry the perfect woman. And they would be the true spiritual parents of humankind. And the church was to regard these true parents the true spiritual parents as their true parents. And then the people that were married in these mass wedding ceremonies would be the true children to the true parents of this church. Does that confuse you any? And I really hope I didn't confuse you. I tried to break that down a little bit to make it more understanding. But so now Myung has called himself the third Adam. He is the Messiah sent to complete God's plan as the third Adam. And him and his wife would be the true parents, and his followers that he married in these ceremonies would be the true children. Okay. We're all together. That's not confusing at all. So I understand. I do. I get it. Okay. Trying to get this. My dogs are starting to bark. Let me go get them taken care of. Sorry about that. Seems like since my true children have moved on and no longer need my attention 100 times a day, the dogs have taken that spot. And I'm going to just apologize now because they're out and it is about to start pouring. So when that happens, I will probably cut out real quick. So let's get back to this true marriage, because Myung, he is such a great guy. I mean, such a good guy that when he started this church, he was already married and his wife was pregnant. But I guess she just wasn't going to do it as far as being the his wife for this new purpose that he has. And he completely just left him. Left his pregnant wife. Went on and found his second wife. Now, in a statement that probably will not shock anybody too much, Myung was 40 when he found his second wife, who was 17. Yeah, that's just a little disturbing, but hey, what do I know? I couldn't find much mentioned about his first wife, and truthfully, it was not something I really searched either. I mean, the woman sounds like she got away in time, so I didn't talk too much about her. That's really all that I know. That she was dumped, unfortunately, by this awesome man. That was not the color I was hoping it would be. And he started a church and I don't think he had much to do with his child either, from what I could tell. Anyways, I'm digressing here, and there's my summons. So, let me go get the dogs. Okay, sorry about that. So, as I was saying, there's not much mention of his first wife or anything that I found, but I didn't really look. Said she looked like she dodged a bullet here. I mean, I don't know. You be the judge. So, he married his second wife with the intention of forming perfect unions in the group, and he's the second Messiah, or he's the Messiah, the third Adam. His goal is to restore God's plan. But because Myung didn't believe in romantic love, marriages were arranged within the church. And he would perform mass rituals called Holy Blessing Ceremony. Okay, try that again. Holy Marriage Blessings Ceremony to marry the couples. So during the ritual, seriously, the couples were removed from man's sinful lineage to become part of God's sinless family. He did a lot of these mass weddings. Like, they really became known for these mass weddings. And in 1982, I want to just talk about two of his biggest ones. In 1982, he conducted the blessing ceremony in Madison Square Garden for 2,000 couples. 2,000 couples came to be married in this mass wedding ceremony in Madison Square Garden. That's not even a tip of the iceberg. His largest ceremony was in 2009. So, think about it. It's not terribly long ago. When he presided over 30,000 couples in Seoul's Olympic Stadium. And I'm just like, wow. So I'm going to just say, to be fair, these mass weddings were not actually weddings in the legal sense. So there was nothing legal about getting married by Myung in this way. And the couples that, sorry, my thing moved. The couples who had been matched by the church were either to get married before or after the ceremony, or following the requirements of your country, if you wanted to make it legal at all. I really don't know what the status ratio was of those that went through this ceremony and then those that actually decided to make it legal. I don't know. But the newlywed couples were to refrain from sex for 40 days. Then they were to consummate their marriage within a 3-day ritual after the blessing, in which Myung dictated what sexual positions they were to use during this 3-day period. Anybody grossed out yet? A little skeeved out? Yeah. I am too. Oh, this is going to be yellow. Okay. We'll just do some damage control. Let me get this evened out before I try to talk too much. All right. So I did find something interesting. And I don't know, we're always trying to find, if we're in a group or something that's kind of questionable, you want to find those statistics, right? That you can say, well, look at this. And this said that from 2012 to 2018, there were fewer than 5% couples who had received the marriage blessing and divorced. So only 5% divorced that had this blessing. Now, that's great numbers. It really is. However, let's just remember that this is not a legal, binding marriage. So, how many of those went and got married? How many of those made it legal and then got divorced? That's my question. Was it 5% that actually went on and made it legal and then got divorced? I don't know. These are the kind of facts you don't find. But it could just be me. These are the kind of facts that I find interesting and telling. You go somewhere, marriage counselors say, and you're like, yeah, I work with married couples, and only 5% of those that I work with get divorced. That's the kind of things you want to hear, right? And you're joining a church to have the perfect spiritual parents, and you want to be the perfect spiritual children, and they're saying, yeah, only 5% of us that go through this divorce. It's a selling point. But is it the truth? It is very possible that I am being very skeptical and overthinking this, but maybe, and this is going to sound really harsh, but maybe if people thought more about things, there would be less of those that are, or that fall victim to people like Moon. Does that make sense without being, I don't know. Anyways, so that's just where I think. So the core beliefs were that the heavenly parents was to include both a male and a female to be mother and father. They stated that the parents' wish for their children was to become better, happier, more creative, more capable than the parents were themselves. Which, okay, I think any of us as parents have that belief. That shouldn't be anything specified by a church, but again. So, they believe that God was not a distant, removed, supernatural being that, that's not much concealer. He's actually the original parent and feels and loves for their children and would feel deep pain for their suffering. And their responsibility was to bring comfort to God's heart by restoring that personal relationship between themselves and God. Yeah, that's just a bunch of hooey, I think. It's kind of a very confusing way of saying, well, I don't know. What exactly did they say there? I mean, I agreed with the fact that they said they want their children to be better than them. And I got a piece of hair or something stuck somewhere. And there it is. I get that. That should honestly be about anybody's wish that is a parent, that their children exceed everything they've done and their expectations and, you know, that kind of thing. But to say that I'm going to bring my child to be part of God's heart by restoring, it's just very, everything else just got lost in the muck, and I don't know how you could go in and actually achieve this kind of goal when you can't even understand it. Again, I'm sorry. Trying not to be judgmental. This one was so much easier to do than last week's, but there's times I'm looking at it going, really? So, the church became controversial as Moon believed that the Bible could not be understood without the aid of a book he wrote. Imagine that, right? He, wrote a book titled The Divine Principle, which he claimed was divinely inspired. Again. So let's talk about this Divine Principle book that he wrote. So near the end of the Korean War, Moon fled to South Korea, and that is when he established his church. So he published his exposition of the Divine Principle, which is a reinterpretation of the Bible that established the main goals of what he built his church upon. Moon wrote this principle when he was 16, and claimed he had a vision from Jesus in which, like I mentioned before, he claimed this vision from Jesus told him to carry out God's plan, and that he was chosen by God himself to save mankind from Satanism. The Divine Principle was to help them understand who they truly were and what they could do to reach the innate potential that God intended for them. However, your Bible was useless unless you bought his book. So his book was a guide to help you understand the Bible. And if you didn't have it, then you didn't have true understanding. And yeah, go out and spend a fortune. And you know what? I didn't link this book. I linked some other books in here. I think I want to do that. I think I want to see if I can find it first. Let me go on and just look real quick so I can tell you if I found it. So I actually did one better for you. I found a link with the actual book in it. And it was all these pages with each chapter and each, you can click on each link and read each chapter. So I have linked that in the description box below. But, excuse me, for those of you that may not be interested in going through and clicking it, let's just get an overview of what this is. It was the divine principle was to present the story of God as he worked through the Bible and world history as we know it. And it was the purpose of this divine principle to reawaken each person's understanding of their divine contribution to bring the world back to God's family. And the teachings were as followed. Number one, God is all-powerful and all-knowing. But he cannot be happy and complete without the shared love of his children. Number two, God's original plan was that all men and women were to be sons and daughters of God. Had Adam and Eve not fallen, all men and women would have been of the same perfection as Jesus. Number three, that all men and women should be one in mind and body with God. Number four, all of God's divine work in history was to establish one centered family around God. That would be the position that would turn the world around. So once we were all of God's family, all of the same mind, the world was going to be a much better place. So, now, like I said, I've linked that. If you are interested, feel free to check it out. But, yeah, that was his little contribution to the Bible, the divine principle. Struggle sometimes talking and speaking when I'm doing and here it is. I couldn't find it. So now that we've talked about the church's beliefs and wait a minute, this ain't right. Sorry, I was confusion. So now that we've talked about the beliefs of this church, let's talk about recruitment. So as I mentioned when I opened this story, they have a huge following, like unbelievably huge. And how did they get that, right? And they've been around for quite a while, so the numbers have nicely grown, I'm sure. It is still an active church. I want to make that statement. So when Myung started his church in the 50s, he decided that he would send missionaries around the world to embark on what they called world tours. And they engaged in a practice that was called love bombing. And they would target lonely young people and make them feel included into their community, right? They hit colleges a lot from what I can understand. And, you know, as a college kid, probably in the 60s, a lot of people were trying to find themselves. I think we talked about this last episode with the hippies and the New Love era and people trying to find what it was they wanted in life, who they wanted to become. They became very susceptible to people like the Moonies. And that's what they were hoping for. So they practiced what they called love bombing, and they were sent the first missionaries was sent in 1959, and they were sent to the U.S. and originally sent to the San Francisco Bay Area. And when they went and started their travel to the West, had 500 members at the time. This is, like I said, 1959. By 1971, so you've got, 12 years here, they had a presence in all 50 states. So in that short amount of time, they just love bombed the hell out of people, and were really growing up this following of theirs. So okay, so some of these targeted people would end up rejecting their own family and give up their possessions to join the church. And it was kind of a requirement that we find out. And there was one member, his name was Steve, and he was in college when he was approached by these young ladies and joined their group. And he later revealed details of this experience and discussed the 3 young women who approached him while he was eating lunch one day. And they lured him into discussing and talking about how to make the world a better place. So that was what their discussion was with this kid. And he's quoted as saying, and I quote, "Little did I know, within a few weeks, I would be told to drop out of school, donate my bank account to the church, look at Moon as my true parent, and to believe my parents were Satan. I didn't even believe in Satan until I met this group." End quote. So I don't know how long he stayed in the group. His story is probably very readily available because he formed the anti-cult watchdog group, which I will link in the description box for you. It's a very nice website, very well done. I looked at the basics. So if you know somebody in a cult and you need help, this is a great resource for some interventions, recovery, etc. Or even how to spot cults, and how to, it's a really great. So check that link out if you have any experience with a cult or need help or whatever. I feel, he took his experience and really made this into something worthwhile. But I really didn't get into his story because it kind of detracts from the actual story of the Moonies. This is the exact opposite of how to get rid of or get away from a cult. And I'm talking about the cult. So just wanted to state that it's listed below. I do recommend you checking it out. It's a very, looks like a very good website. Okay, so Moon's followers increased as the years went by, which is not really a shock, I'm saying. And like I said, they fundraised as they went. And, or better yet, let's just be honest. When they recruited, they took that person's bank account, right? I mean, it wasn't just all fundraising, fun and games, because it didn't really specify other than the book you have to buy when you join the group. It doesn't really specify how they fundraised other than new members and taking their bank accounts. So, yeah. But Moon became one of the wealthiest religious leaders in the world. His empire included the conservative Washington Times newspaper that he, I guess, bought, owned, ran, not really sure. And in the 70s and 80s, the church, 70s and 80s now, I wouldn't have been shocked if they had said more recent time, but the 70s and 80s, this was pretty much unheard of. The church became a multi-billion-dollar business empire. Now, let me say that, multi-billion in the 70s and 80s. That's crazy. So, I mean, obviously they were doing more than taking people's bank accounts. I just didn't I didn't get a specification on exactly what it was they did to fundraise. I really probably should have looked at that, because I know in my last story that kind of was an important section, but I didn't. Sorry. But they were a multi-billion-dollar business connection, and with most empires, or when you're talking money in the billions, there's political connections that's involved, right? So this church is no different. They really tried to dip their toes into as much political bullcrap as they could. And in 1974, Myung organized a pray-in support of President Richard Nixon, as he was being pressured to resign over the Watergate scandal. So, yeah. Their motto during this set-in, or pray-in, was forgive, love, and unite. And Nixon publicly thanked them, which brought a lot of attention to the group. And like, who is this group that he's thanking? And I'm sure those that were against Nixon was like, okay, who is this group? What do we need to be worried? Do we need to whatever? And then those that were in support of Nixon probably thought they had a champion in Myung's group, and, you know, might have even resulted in some more followers. I don't know. I didn't get into all that. But it did bring more attention to the church, so I have to assume it was not negative, because it didn't say negative attention. Now, in 2004, and whenever you talk in the 2000s, I'm like, God, that was yesterday, right? Wasn't that just yesterday? Look at my hair. I love it. Myung held a coronation ceremony in an office building of the U.S. Senate, and he was crowned himself King of Peace. This event was called Tear Down the Cross Tour. This is a religious group now. Just remember that. A religious group. But Myung claimed he wanted to remove crosses, Christian crosses, from almost 300 churches that were in poor neighborhoods. He considered these crosses to be obstacles to uniting religions under his leadership. Okay. I don't think I need more blush, but I'm just going to keep doing it. Why not? Put the brush down. I'm just kind of speechless on what to think about that, because when I think religion, I think crosses, I think your symbolism, but no, not him. So currently the group has 1 to 2 million people, followers. It is the largest active cult. The church has a presence in more than 100 countries, though the exact membership figures are difficult to estimate. And in the 1990s, this was a relative peaceful time for the Unification Church, right? But problems arose in Japan that really put them back in the spotlight. And this was following the Aum Shinrikyo incident in 1995. The country was gripped by anti-cult hysteria due to this group. So this Aum Shinrikyo is another cult that I have actually looked into doing, and if we continue this series, I very well will throw it in there. It looks like it's something that just batshit crazy. But we'll see. After the initial videos are done, we'll see how the series went, the following, if you all liked them or not. Then I might bring this up. But I'm going to do a quick glance at the Aum Shinrikyo. And it was a cult. It was a doomsday cult in Japan, founded in 1987. So I don't want to get into a lot of basics, but they were responsible for the deadly Tokyo sarin attack in 95, And then, of course, they claimed it. And after that, they were found to be responsible for the Matsumoto sarin attack the year before. So these were some deadly attacks by this Aum cult. And all cults came under scrutiny after that, which included the Unification Church. And all cults were put into this negative light. No shock, right? Okay, I'm back. I'm done, and let's talk. So, Moon's daughter-in-law also didn't help with this scrutiny they were coming under. She wrote an expose of the life in the Moon family in 1998. So 1995 was the bombings, and the cults are being, really watched and under a lot of hysteria, a lot of scrutiny. And here she comes in 1998 doing an expose of the group. And the daughter-in-law talks about being underage. She was 15 when Moon married her to his oldest son. The legal age to be married in New York was 17, and it still is, apparently. And no, she was 15 when he married her. And she claims that her husband was volatile and abusive. So when she fled and eventually got a divorce after 14 years of marriage, so she was still 29, very young, and she left him in 1996 at 29. She had custody of their 5 children. But her ex-husband could get visitation rights. All he had to do was pass regular drug testing, which he never could. He never could pass the regular drug testing that was required so he could see his children. So, yeah. She claims Moon knew about his addictions and didn't do anything about it. She actually claims he actually made it worse because he threw lavish gifts and money and all kinds of things at him, and it didn't help the problem because he was just using it for drugs and alcohol and partying or whatever. So I will, I need to quit picking at my makeup, don't I? I will link I will put a link to the book in the description box for you if you are interested in looking at it. And so Moon passed away in 2012 at the age of 92. So he lived a long life. After his death, the movement split into multiple factions. One of these factions could have their own stories in this series. I'm not even kidding. I looked up, so I thought there was this episode in one of the ID channels series that I watched. I linked it in the last episode. I have a ton of them, bookmarked so I can watch them, and one of them I thought was it for this story, and actually it turned into this other one, and it's just on the outside it looks crazy. Boy. We'll see. Like, again, it could be one I link, I don't know, or one I do if we move forward. So his oldest son, the one mentioned above that the ex-daughter-in-law wrote the expose, he died in 2008 due to a heart attack. And he was 46 at the time. So very young, I'm sure, without it stating it, but I'm sure drugs and alcohol didn't help any at all. So Moon's widow, which I'm not really gone into much about her, but she started her own faction. Basically, actually, it was considered that she just took over the main faction, right? And she was known in the movement as the Messiah now, or the Mother of Humankind. And she founded the Women's Federation for World Peace International. So she went on and did her little thing too. Moon's eldest living son, which would have been the middle child, started his own faction titled Family Peace Association, while the youngest son started the Sanctuary Church. And the Sanctuary Church is the one that I was talking about that could get its own series eventually. And just a little bit about it, like I did the AUM, I don't want to go much into it, but just to give you an idea, they're based out of Pennsylvania. Very heavy into guns and ammo and whatnot. Like, this dude has a picture of himself. So if you look up the Sanctuary Church, there's a picture of him, and he's got this crown on made of bullets. And apparently they're pretty heavy in the political ring as well. So like I said, they could get their own story, but that's about all I'll say for this right now. When Reverend Myung died, he was worth millions. Millions. So, as I mentioned, this is still an active cult, and one of the largest active cults. The main sect of this cult being led by Myung's widow. But I haven't mentioned the cult status. There seems to be a lot of questions on if this is a true cult. Okay, personally, I think it really rides that fine line of being a church versus being a cult. By my definition that I gave in the very first episode, they fall in quite a few of those categories, right? But they also are not overzealous. Like that first episode I did, I struggled. It was bad. That isn't the case here. So there's some things, like you have to leave your family. You can never have conversation or contact with your family again. You have to give them all your money. You have to do this, 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 and this. So those kinds of things really tend to make me think it's more of a cult. But it really does follow that fine line. So let's discuss it, because this is a very hot topic. Apparently, a lot of scholars, a lot of people have opinions on it, and I'm going to touch base on a few of those. So again, everything I'm discussing, there will be links in the description box for you to click on and form your own opinion. So back in the beginning, when the church sent out missionaries to spread their word to the Western world, many parents of these college-age kids that were being recruited were not happy. I wouldn't be happy. Especially once they came to the part where they had to cut off all their family. That was, kind of a warning sign something's wrong, and most of these parents noticed it. And they sought help of deprogrammers to save their children. Now, if you have to be deprogrammed, that also is kind of a check in the box of you are a cult, right? So this controversy, they were the programmers to save their children. They even filed civil lawsuits against the church trying to stop what they were doing. And this controversy surrounding the church did draw some attention from the Congress, and there was congressional hearings, and it kind of went nowhere. Like, the best thing that happened, which is not the best thing that happened, Myung got arrested for tax evasion. So he spent like 18 months in jail for tax evasion, but these parents wanted help. They didn't want this guy to go to jail, because it was going to go on whether he's in jail or not. They were still going to carry on these practices that he had started, whether he is visibly there or not. And that is what happened. So, getting back on track, I just wanted to mention that because even from the early 60s, when this all started, there was claims of having to deprogram the group, the members that went into the group, and it was considered a cult at that time. So it was considered a cult almost from the beginning of them going into the Western world. But the Unification Church is characterized by false, unbiblical theology. So Myung crowned himself the King of Peace in 2004. And he also claimed to be the Messiah and the Savior. He also claimed his wife was the Holy Spirit. And they were claiming to be the true parents of the world. And all their kids that they blessed in this marriage ceremony was their true kids. And they were the first to have children who were sinless. Now, I'm just going to say, having a son that's an alcoholic, abusive drug user probably doesn't help with that whole our kids are the perfect creation of God type of situation. So no wonder he kind of ignored it, tried to brush it away, keep it from getting attention, throw some money at it, and it'll go hide. It's really hard to keep up appearances sometimes. But I mean, everything I just listed there ticks off cult boxes, right? Right. But Myung's church denies that Sorry. Let's try that again. Myung's church denies that Jesus was raised from the dead. And they deny his divine nature as we know it, which again goes against biblical beliefs. And the denial of the deity of Christ puts the church in the myriad of cults and false religions that have the same beliefs. So you can argue a cult teaches false religions, and this is where they fall. It is also said that Myung used deceptive tactics and mind control policies or practices. I don't know. I didn't really see any of that in my research. I saw mention of that. I saw mention of some sexual assaults, but nothing to give me proof to back it up. So I kind of just left it out. But it is said that he used the deceptive tactics, mind control. He wanted his followers to follow him as the Messiah, and again, false prophet against the teaching. I mean, these are all in the cult section. Okay. However, there's always some, isn't there? J. Jordan Milton is a professor of American religious history. However, did not classify the Unification Church as a cult, but instead as a new religious movement. And I think I mentioned that early on, that they were branded as that, the new religious movement instead of a cult. Now, he was not the only person to think this. Dr. Eileen Barker, who is the emeritus professor of sociology at the London School of Economics, wrote her book, The Making of a Moonie, Choice or Brainwashing. So I'm confused. I don't know much about London schools or whatever, but I know here, if you're in economics, you don't really have a lot to do with religion, philosophies, and such. But she's a professor of economics writing a book on cults, which is fine. You can have these extra hobbies or whatever, but I don't know what would make her an expert. It just confused me a little bit. But anyways, she has her book, The Making of a Moonie, Choice or Brainwashing, and I did link the book below. It was a year-long study of the church and its practices, and she concluded that there were no punitive or controlling practices demonstrated. So they weren't a cult. So whether you think they are a cult or not, they are the largest active cult, depending on how you associate it. It ticks many of the boxes in that checklist that I had given you before. But however you want to label the Unification Church, it's undoubtedly an unusual religious experience, becoming extremely wealthy while doing it, and very widespread. So that is the story of the late Reverend Myung and the Unification Church. It was a nice change from the cult I did last week. There's so many questions on, is this a cult or not, that it kind of, you didn't get all that nasty stuff that I touched last week. Anyways, I hope you watched last week's. If you didn't, go check it out. So, this episode I found could have many different sections talked about. So, we'll see. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please, let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts, opinions. Do you consider this a cult? Had you ever heard of it before? So that was another thing. I had never really heard of this church before. I had heard in passing of the Moonies. Didn't know what they were really. I knew they were some kind of cult, but I really didn't know much about them. So did you know the story? Had you heard this before? Did you know anything about it? But like I said, I had heard of the Moonies, but nothing sounded familiar as I was going through this. So it was probably just a passing thing. But thank you for watching. I appreciate it tremendously. If you are new and you're joining me, I cannot thank you enough. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button. And if you are one of my regular followers, thank you. I love you. You all are amazing. Please keep giving me your feedback. Please send me messages. Please let me know how you think and feel and what I can improve, what I need to improve. So there's always plenty of that, right? So until next time, guys, goodbye.